Perfect. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to AuDHD and Then Some. Today, joined by someone whose work has been making a real difference to neurodivergent children and their families. Dr. Inyang Takon is a consultant neurodevelopmental paediatrician with over 30 years of clinical experience across both the UK and in some parts of Africa. She specialises in ADHD, autism, developmental delay, Tourette syndrome, epilepsy, fetal alcohol syndrome, also known as FAS, and a spectrum disorder and other neurodevelopmental conditions. She's also the co-founder of School Doctor, a social enterprise helping families navigate assessments and support. And she's the host of the Early Intervention Matters podcast, where she shares practical, evidence-based advice for parents and other professionals. One of the things I was particularly interested in Dr. Takon's passion for improving understanding of neurodiversity within minorities and African communities, where stigma and barriers to diagnosis can often delay children getting the support they need. So today we're going to be talking about early intervention, recognising the signs of neurodivergence, supporting families, and what parents can do if they think something doesn't feel quite right with their child. Dr. Takon, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much, Ellie. Thank you
It was so
for inviting
long
me.
because you've achieved so much.
Thank you. I think when you say it like that, where you think, oh, that's a bit of a work, but it's been fun doing it. So I haven't really seen it as work.
I'm so glad. And you've done life at the same time as well.
I've done life, raised children
Yeah,
to young adults as well.
amazing.
So yeah, it's been full on, but it's been a rich experience
It's
for
been a
me.
journey.
Yeah, it is.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Dr. Yang Takon, as you mentioned. So I've spent about 3 decades now doing pediatrics, and when I started pediatrics, I started doing that in Africa, in Nigeria, where I did my primary medical degree. So after my primary medical degree, we have to then specialize in a subspecialty, and I love pediatrics from the get go when I was at medical school. I loved children because I felt children were, you could readily engage with them, but
Mm.
also even a non-verbal child could communicate things to you even when they couldn't speak in words. So I liked observing. I liked those nuances where they couldn't even talk, but they could communicate their needs and
Mm-hmm.
to you. So I actually love pediatrics from very early on. So I then went on to specialize in pediatrics. And initially, when I did that, I was doing general pediatrics. I became interested in neurology. But in the course of doing that, I wanted to know more about children. So when you work in the hospital, you see children who are unwell, and when they leave, you don't know really what goes on after that. So once you've discharged them, you don't follow them
Yeah.
up. So I never really knew what happened to some of the sickest children that came in
Yeah.
when they were discharged, and I just used to wonder, whatever came of them. So that's what led me to actually becoming more interested in neurodevelopmental pediatrics. and
Perfect.
yeah, so I then said, because I was seeing lots of sick children from prematurity, sepsis, children who were really unwell, but when
Yeah.
they became well, you discharged them, but you never knew
And
what
then
happened to them.
that would upset me because you become sort of close to the child and you
Exactly.
care about their welfare more than
Yeah.
anything, and then you wave them goodbye and you
Yeah,
don't see them again.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
I get attached to people, so I completely
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
What has
So,
kept you passionate about this work for more than 30 years? It's a long time to be passionate about something.
well, I think what's made me passionate is the fact that you you become part of a child and family's journey. So I've seen children where things were really down and out at the beginning. The families were, completely not confused and not knowing what to do. It's almost as if children's future were written up at the time that they were going through that initial crisis process.
Hmm.
But being able to work with them, and I've seen lots and lots of children who have achieved so much, gone on to live independent lives, who have done excellently well. And that's when I became passionate, because I was not only seeing a child from a little aspect, but I was becoming part of that child's journey to actually help to change a child's life and trajectory. So that's what kept me passionate, because when I see a child or family in a crisis, but I just feel there's something that can be done, in terms of, finding the right diagnosis, supporting the child, being an advocate for the child and the
Yeah.
family, because it's not just giving the diagnosis, it's actually ensuring that the support systems are there to help the child. And sometimes the families are so down during this period that
Yeah.
they actually need somebody to step in and help them during that journey. And that's been one of the greatest things I've found really useful, that I've advocated for children and they've been able to get the support, and then to see them come out the other side. It always makes me cry when I see them becoming young adults who are doing really well, who've gotten great skills, are doing things and they're happy. I look at the beginning and I look at where they are now, and it's just been an incredible um, journey, and something to be part of. So that's kept me really passionate, because I don't see any write off in any child. I always feel there's
That's
hope.
amazing. Do you think that's why early intervention matters so much? Because it's a whole journey. I was diagnosed as an adult and my children are in their 20s now, but the only reason
Wow.
I think I was diagnosed was because people kept approaching me, like teachers and stuff, and saying, "Your child is showing signs of autism." And I'm from a culture as well where that was like, whoa, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure if that's a good thing to say to someone. I was offended when
Mm,
when people kept coming up to me, like teachers and doctors, and saying, "I think your child's autistic." I thought that that was not the right thing to say to people. And
mm,
then, and ashamedly now, I found out myself the autism, it came from me, and the
mm,
ADHD come from me. But I had a later diagnosis, so I've been on a completely different journey to my
mm.
children. Do you think early intervention makes so much difference?
I think it makes so much difference, because when you look at some children and the challenges they've gone through before they've gotten that diagnosis, um, it could be the school not understanding them being considered as naughty,
Yeah,
other children, not, interacting with them well, or sometimes being unkind to them,
yeah.
the child being isolated, and other traumatic
So many
experience.
things. I've had 40 years of just feeling like, what's wrong with me? So if
Yeah,
I would have known from when I was a child, it would have it wouldn't have changed everything, but it would have lessened a lot of trauma, and it
yes,
gave me validation and taught my
yeah,
parents how to deal with me. So 100% I agree.
yeah. And again, it prevents the child trying to be somebody they're not, the
Yeah.
child having to try to fit in with everybody. We don't want people to try and fit in, we want people to be themselves, but we want the environment around them to understand. So again, it can be very tiring and exhausting for children having to be who they're not, and that puts a lot of pressure on them and anxiety.
I wish I knew at school, because I feel like now I kind of have an epiphany a moment, and I feel like all the time at school I was being taught by a fish in a class full of fish how to be a
Yeah,
fish,
yeah,
and I was constantly being criticized and criticizing myself. Why
yeah,
can't I be a fish? Why can't I swim? And
yeah,
beating myself up about it. But I now realize that I was never a fish, and that's why I
yeah.
couldn't do that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but
There's nothing wrong with it.
I wish
Yes,
somebody had told me sooner, because it would have prevented a lot of heartache
yeah.
for myself. So I do think early intervention matters. We hear the phrase early intervention all the time, but what does it actually mean, and why can it make such a difference for children?
Thank you, Ellie. Early intervention. Yes, and I understand, there's a lot of early intervention, but we need it to be quite specific.
Yeah,
Because when we're talking about neurodevelopmental differences, it's the different, when you pick up, say, early, where a child's difficulties with communication and, interaction or attention, when you pick that up early, you can immediately, get going with using the appropriate strategies for the child.
yeah.
Everybody can key into giving the child the tools and the support to make that child achieve their best.
Yeah, if you've got the I just, that's the thing. I
Yeah,
wish now I'm so passionate about giving people the language, the
yeah,
strategies, and the toolbox because that has so much
yeah,
power. So the
yeah,
earlier you can start, the better. I get that
yeah,
completely.
yeah. And you know what happens if you don't do that? So that child gradually develops low self esteem because they
Yeah,
feel I am not doing as well as everybody else.
yeah,
And then that low self-esteem builds up into more anxiety, and then you get to the point of school refusal,
yeah,
and then you get to the point that there's challenging behavior at home. Parents can't understand why the child is having meltdowns,
yeah.
or this. It's all the pressures from having to be somebody, where they haven't been given the tools. It's just
And
like us walking around. If you need glasses and you're not given glasses,
yeah.
and you're told just look at the board. you
Yeah,
know
and you can only take in half the work. And
you
in later life that led me
yeah,
that low self-esteem led me into abusive relationships,
yes,
self-medicating with with drugs in my later days. it
yeah,
it had a bang on effect on
yes,
so many things, so that's why I think it's so important.
yeah,
What should parents be looking out for specifically in neurodivergence? Because I know that you're in so many fields you're invested in, fetal alcohol syndrome and
yeah.
etc. But specifically in neurodivergence, what should parents be looking out for in the beginning?
So we always say that as a parent, you know your child very well,
Hmm.
and you're the expert on your child. So you've been seeing your child, right? From day one when they've been born. But there are things that you if you think your child, say for example, if your child is supposed to be saying words at a certain stage and hasn't started speaking, or you notice that your child has particular patterns of behavior where they want to do certain things all the time and they're not open to
Change.
entertaining other
Yeah.
things, or you're taking your child somewhere and they suddenly start having a big meltdown when you're approaching that place, you might not have realized that that might be due to either sensory issues or some other things, but you just notice that actually every time we're going to this place or the supermarket or this place, she just has a meltdown. You can't sit in restaurants, you can't go to regular places that other children should be going to. And you notice that maybe when you have guests in the house, the child becomes very upset, not keen on playing with other children. So there are different things. She might want to sit and play the same game and not be open to other people coming to share that game. Or if another child wants to play, might not really be interested. Or the child wants you to do the same thing, every night. Some parents might notice if I don't read that poem to them, they won't, go to sleep. You notice that your child is highly dependent on certain routines, and they have to have certain things, or even clothings. They might be particular about the clothings or the type of clothing or food.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so you start
food was
noticing,
a massive one
yeah,
for my children, and
yeah,
clothing. They couldn't wear jeans, or one
yeah,
of them specifically couldn't wear jeans because it would
yeah,
irritate them. And the thing is with me is I thought that it was all normal behavior
yeah,
because it was something that I'd experienced. So
yeah,
as a I didn't know I was neurodivergent at the time, but I just thought it wasn't a big deal because this was something I experienced, and my
yeah,
parents thought it wasn't a big deal
yeah,
because I was just like my dad, awkward, socially awkward. So,
yeah,
I think some parents don't pick up on it because
yeah.
they are neurodivergent themselves.
Themselves.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And that happens quite a lot in clinical settings where it's only after we finish the child's diagnostic assessment that the parent would say, actually, everything you've been saying just sounds like me.
yeah,
And it's at that time that parents have been able to pick up on the fact that they might be neurodivergent themselves. And many parents have gone on for assessments and been
yeah.
given a
I think
diagnosis.
it's a pandemic that's happening. I think
Yeah,
that's why in my job I'm seeing so many late diagnoses. And
yeah,
I think a lot of it, I've noticed a pattern. It's because their children are getting diagnosed and
yeah,
then they're seeking validation for themselves.
yeah.
So 100% I agree with that. How can parents tell the difference between typical childhood behavior and something that may warrant an assessment?
Okay, so what you would find, we usually say to parents is watch out the patterns of those behaviors, because usual behaviors, if it's just a momentary behavioral disruption, it's sometimes usually due to maybe you're asking them to do something and or the child wants to have their way and they don't have it, or things like that. But it's not, it just happens sporadically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with differences, neurodiversity, you will notice a consistent pattern. So if you start watching, you will notice that consistent pattern of that behavior, usually happening at set times
Mm-hmm.
or set places. So you might notice that if the child is on their own and at home, they might be fine, you won't notice anything. But the minute that you are taking that child out to a particular place, then you're noticing that. And so you begin to build a pattern
I
that,
think it's so helpful,
yeah,
especially as me, because I'm ADHD as well.
yeah,
So it was awful for me to get my children through assessments because asking an ADHD person to fill out forms for free
yeah,
children and
yeah,
remembering. So
exactly.
I just, to be honest, the only one I helped was the one that presented with the worst issues because I couldn't have the capacity to help three different children.
Yeah,
So unfortunately, a few of them didn't get diagnosis until they was older, but I found the thing that I would do was it become easier when I started to write things down, even if it's
yes,
in the notes on your phone, even if you
yes,
record them. If
yes,
writing isn't for you and you have to voice speak them into
yes,
WhatsApp or voice notes, keep noticing them patterns and keep
yes,
writing them down that way. It
yeah,
seems silly at first, but when you look back, it will help the situation
yes.
a lot more.
Yeah, I actually did a short video for families on what is helpful for them when they're going for a neurodevelopmental assessment.
Yeah.
And I did that short video, and it was something that I feel that parents would need to have, because it can be quite overwhelming
So overwhelming.
when you think on the spot. If you go to the clinic and the family comes on the spot and you
And then
start
you go
asking them,
home and you think, shit,
yeah, yeah,
why didn't I say
exactly,
this, and this?
exactly,
And especially if you're a neurodivergent parent, which chances
yes,
are you might be, you forget it
exactly.
all in that moment.
Exactly, exactly. So I tell parents, please write these things down,
Yeah.
because you will need them. You will absolutely need these things. So I do say to parents, please write them down.
And
It's
nothing you write down can be silly. You
no,
might think, oh, I'm writing down this thing and this seems stupid. But
yeah,
honestly, anything can be connected. They ask you the most unusual questions. So you can never be too prepared. Write
yeah,
down anything that you want.
yes,
No proper assessor's going to look at you and think, oh my God,
no,
why did she
absolutely
write that
not.
down? Yeah, the more information that you give them, the
The
more
better,
thankful that they're going to
yeah.
be.
I mean, I always find really helpful when families who've come to my clinic quite prepared and they've written everything down, and
Yeah,
I usually say to them, this is so, so helpful, because, I know how overwhelming it can be when you're put on the spot
yeah.
and being asked questions. I mean, I can't even remember my children's birth weights
No,
and stuff
no,
like
I can't
that.
remember any of them.
So I always say to them, I can't remember this, so
Yeah,
it would be pointless anyone asking me
yeah, same.
that. So, but if I had written it down, it is, and parents should not beat themselves up
No.
for not remembering. We carried so much already. I tell people that parenting is hard work. You're
Yeah.
having to store so much information for your children on a daily basis. And I
Yeah.
think people don't realize how hard work it is to be as a parent. So write things down, put things down on paper, and then have it ready when you're going to see your doctor. Have things ready when you're going to talk to the teacher.
And it is overwhelming because the first diagnosis that one of my child, the one that presented the most needy,
Mm,
it was tics and Tourette's.
mm,
So every time there would be a stressful situation, my child would start a verbal tic, which was a scream. So I
mm,
remember taking the child to the assessment, and I sat down with all my children around me, and
mm.
specifically this screaming one that screamed every 2 seconds. This tick, and the doctor would ask me, was it a normal birth, was it a normal delivery? And I had 3 children, I can't remember. Then I've got this
Absolutely.
one screaming, and my memory with my executive function's so bad anyway. So I wish that I'd wrote a lot more down. So that's what I always say to everyone. And if you can't write, you voice note. Even if you take a voice note in
Yeah,
to your practitioner, they will appreciate it. So
yeah.
so say I have a child now, okay? My children are grown up, but a lot of people approach me now and say, I have a child, they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they could be 10. And I've noticed they have strong AuDHD, ADHD, some neurodivergent traits. What's the first step? Where do we go with this?
So in the country, it's quite so in the UK where I work, it's quite variable, the pathways.
Yeah.
So
We got
I
right to choose at the moment, haven't we?
Yes, so you've got right to choose, but the local NHS pathways, in most places you go to your GP. But before you go to your GP, you need to get some information from school. It's always helpful to get a letter from school saying, this is how Billy presents, and
Yeah.
these are the concerns, because that letter would help support the referral being made by the GP to the services. Because what happens when the GP writes to the services, we do something called a triage or an
Yeah.
intake, and we tend to look at the information that is supported by school information. Unfortunately, because there's such a large volume of referrals being
Yeah.
received on a weekly basis, there has to be a way of like looking at the ones where people feel there is enough information. Saying that, there are times when school have said there's nothing wrong, and
Yeah.
that happens
I've heard
often
I've
as well.
heard I've heard that a lot, and
Yeah,
sometimes the child doesn't, because I know, like, one of my children, the
yeah,
first couple of years at school, they presented absolutely fine because they were
yeah,
masking the shit out of themselves, and
yeah,
then they would come home from school, and
yeah,
oh my god, all
yeah,
hell would break you loose.
yeah,
And that's what a lot of people say to me, my child's not presenting at school, but as soon as they come home, they've masked
yeah,
so hard, they completely melt down, and we have a
yeah,
hell of a time at home.
yeah,
Can I throw a curveball and ask you?
yeah.
So my boys went to school, my older children, but my daughter is actually homeschooled. So what happens if I homeschool my child and I don't have that teacher to back me up with evidence when I go to my GP? Is there any other things that I can use?
So you can get information from other people who've known your child. You can get old school reports. You can get old school information, because the thing is, and we do get this because there are a number of children who are home educated, and how
Mm.
do we get information is usually a major issue. But if you can get information from other settings where your child has gone to, or information from, past school reports or things like that, that's helpful. But your child is also going to, if you don't have it, doesn't mean that your
But
child
even,
has.
like, even a gymnastics class, or if you're
Yes,
Christian, maybe a Sunday school or the
yes,
mosque or
yeah, yeah.
anything like that.
Anything like that.
Anything you can think of.
Anything.
What about
Yeah.
from a family member?
Yeah, and sometimes we've had family members writing to support that referral. So any supportive information can come in. The child or young person is still going to have an objective assessment. So it's still going to have a comprehensive assessment. and people are still going to observe the child and do the diagnostic assessments required. But it is important that we get as much as we can. But and the thing is, professionals who are observing your child during the assessment are also going to be documenting interactions and things.
Yeah.
So yes, it's much more difficult then, but we do say
But
please.
it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think assessments are quite overwhelming, and a lot of people ask me, what do you expect from the actual assessment? You've gone through the waiting list, you've sat your time on the right to choose, or whatever process, whatever country you're in, and
Mm.
then it comes the day for your big assessment that you could have paid thousands of pounds for, or you could
Yeah.
have got on the NHS. And what are they expecting on that actual day? Do you get an answer? I know I've been to assessments, but for anyone else, do you get an answer on the day? Do they send you home with medication? What happens?
No. So you don't tend to get um, so you don't tend to get an answer depending. Let me say depending on the type of assessment
Yeah.
and depending on the pathway. So I have done assessments where a lot of the work has been going on even before I see the person.
Mm-hmm.
So in which case, if I got that information for the referral, I would send out the all the screening questionnaires ahead of the time the person comes. And we do that in the NHS as well. We send out as much information before the person comes so that by the time the child comes, we do the main, interview and diagnostic assessment and examination. That's for ADHD. And we look at all the other information we've gotten, and we sometimes can make a diagnosis if everything is present.
Yeah.
But that's because a lot of the work has been done before this time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if there are times when we've gotten all the information, but we don't have enough to conclude a diagnosis, in which case we will send out for more things. We will ask for more information. We will send things out and put the child through for the test and investigations. So we do that. Now, if it is autism, we will still send out information, but autism is much more a multidisciplinary assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different parts to the autism. So a standard autism assessment includes a diagnostic interview, in which case the clinician meets the child and the family. Now, the clinician is also observing the child at the same time they're taking the history from the child and family. They're doing all that at
Mm-hmm.
the same time. So they get that information, they process it, and then the child is put forward for an autism diagnostic observation assessment called an ADOS, which is usually with a psychologist, speech and language therapist, or sometimes a pediatrician. Because the ADOS is with the child themselves, it has to be done usually on a separate day, just with the child, because the clinician doing the ADOS with the child is taking the child through activities. So a lot of this is like activities, conversations,
Yeah.
but the clinician is doing this using a standard process and is observing how that child is communicating socially, asking questions with there's some parts will include, is the child looking at the exam or the clinician, are they having a conversation, or are they just waiting for the person to prompt them each time? So they want to see how they think, what they, how they communicate,
Yeah.
how they view each of those activities, and those things are scored. And then it comes to the questions, but there are parts where they'll be asked questions just to see their perception on things, things about day to day living, friendship, future goals in life and all that. So each one, we use modules depending on the age of the child. So for the adolescents and older young people, the model that we use will be different from what we will use for the younger children.
Yeah.
And so it's quite structured. So at the end of that, we look at all that information from the ADOS. We look at the information from the interview. We also look at information from the school as well, and then put everything together. Then we look at them against the international standards. You know, the guidelines, the
Yeah.
DSM-5 guidelines or the ICD, International Classification of Disease. There's standards there where a child has to meet certain standards before you give them a diagnosis. And so there are times when, diagnosis has been reached after the assessment, and there are times when it hasn't been reached. I actually did a video on when your child hasn't gotten the diagnosis.
Where
Um,
can we find your videos?
I
So what
can I can
platform?
also send it to you.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube, but I can send it to you, Ellie, so you can also have it on your site so
Yeah,
that
I'd love
family.
to. Yeah, I'd love to link your YouTube or
Yeah,
whatever platform that you use
yeah,
most, definitely.
yeah,
Um, so after your child's been assessed and you get your answer, you know, with one of in the early days, I didn't want my child to be assessed, because I didn't want to pigeonhole them
yeah.
or so my children were actually, thank God, they were very, very clever, like super intelligent, like
Mm,
what they used to call Asperger's. I know it's not that now,
yeah,
but they were super, super intelligent. They overtook my intelligence by the time they were 5.
yeah.
Um, but so I never wanted to send them to another school. I always wanted them to go to a mainstream school because I didn't
Mm,
want to pigeonhole them. But actually, thinking back now, it might have been beneficial for them parents that don't want to pigeonhole their children and don't want to get them an assessment. What would you say? I know I would personally say back then I thought it was a bad idea. Now I think it's the best thing you can do for your child because it gives them extra time in exams. It gives them validation. It lets them know that there's nothing wrong with them. It's just their brain is geared a different way. I think it's so important to give your child a diagnosis. I feel like it's a gift. What would you think?
yeah, yes, and I think the starting point would be to, and that's why it's so important to provide awareness about these differences and conditions, because I think sometimes it's parents don't want the label because of the way that
The
people,
stigma.
the stigma, or the
Yeah.
way society has looked at it. And so I spend time explaining to parents that, you know, we're all different in the way we see things and process things, and that every child is unique and has a gift. And it's important that children, in their different spheres, with their gifts and the way they process things, have that recognition of how they see the world and how they learn, so
Yeah.
that they don't get frustrated and continue to struggle.
And you
Because
know what toolbox to use with them.
exactly, because what happens is if you don't, then your child is spending a good chunk of their lifetime at school,
Hmm.
and from day to day, it will be hard. It is hard work, and they get exhausted and miserable because they're just not being given the. And you know what it is like in the schools is if people don't have the right classification or you know naming of their differences, the support won't follow them.
Yeah, you
Um,
have to
uh,
fight for, even with the
yeah,
diagnosis,
even
I
with the
had to fight.
diagnosis, exactly.
Exactly.
So we see many children, and I've seen this in my clinic. I can tell you this what you have said has played out a lot of
Yeah, I
times
can
in my
imagine.
clinic. It's played out a lot of times. I've seen children where even from the first go, I've said to the parents, "This is what I think it is," and they're like, "No, I don't want that." And sadly, by the time they have come to that realization, the NHS waiting list as at 10 years ago is very
100%.
different from
Yeah,
what it is now. So they're now having to wait 4 years to
yeah,
actually get something that the child could probably have gotten in a short while. In the meantime, this child has struggled so much. And because what happens is, as the child goes up in years, the demands get more. So
yeah,
the demands from year 1 to year 2, is going to be more in year 5, year 6, and when they get to secondary school. So all the defense systems and things that they've been trying to manage, they struggle, and that's
it
when the
gets worse. Yeah.
crisis comes in.
So when my children started secondary school, they
Yeah,
were super, super intelligent. Within about a year, their
yeah,
grades had dropped. I don't know.
yeah,
It's now they were like, it's different to how it used to be A's and B's, but they were predicted like eights and nines, something really crazy high.
yeah,
And by the time they were 2 years into secondary school, their grades had gone down to grade 2 and 3, which are quite low,
yeah,
and because their concentration. And
yeah,
if I had got them diagnosed sooner, and I'm not saying medication is for everyone, but
yeah,
if I'd got them diagnosed sooner, they would have had a diagnosis, they
yeah,
would have had the opportunity to have
yeah,
medication to help them concentrate, and they would
yeah,
have still been up at that high level.
yeah, high
But
level.
unfortunately, because I dilly dallied in the process, and it happens, they wasn't accessing that medication until year 10. And at year 10, once they went on the medication, they made such an improvement that I thought, oh my God, why didn't I do this years ago? I
Hmm.
know medication isn't for everyone,
Yeah,
but at least you have the option once you have the
absolutely.
diagnosis.
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. 100% correct. And I think what you just described is what typically happens,
Yeah,
that you see a super bright child, um, who would have done excellently well. And I've had this happen several times to children I've seen several times, where they've been up there in terms of their grades, and because things were not done on time, their grades have slipped, and then it becomes more of an uphill battle for the children to
yeah.
climb up after that.
Yeah, it's true. What do you think about, so a lot of things that I was really interested in as well, and I think you touched upon it earlier, was cultural and stigma.
Yeah,
So I live in a very, and my family is very, very diverse. We have Somali and Spanish, we have a mix of everything, Arab in our family, everything. So, I know how different cultures work, and I'm aware that some cultures find it more hard to accept a diagnosis for their children. I don't know if that's true or not, but is there a way to make more awareness in different cultures? Because I'm spreading awareness, but I'm spreading awareness in English, and is there a way to spread awareness to all different cultures so we break the stigma? Because I still think even in England there is a stigma when it comes to ADHD. When I told people my children are ADHD, they'd said, oh, they must be so naughty then. And I said, no, actually, one of
jeez.
them is so strict, they won't break a rule. They always talking about God. They're like obsessed with like good stuff. Like honestly, like one of my children is not a rule breaker ever. So, and they have very bad ADHD. So, is a
God, I
stigma
can't
in
believe somebody's still calling that.
they honestly do think that. And then I've seen naughty children at school that are naughty, and it's obvious they're naughty because they have a bad routine, or
Mm,
something's happening at home, and then the parents say, oh, my child's got ADHD because
yeah,
they're naughty.
yeah,
They blame either or. So I know that we have that stigma still in the UK, and I know
yeah,
a lot of people from Arab communities, and I know some Gambian communities as well,
yeah,
and they don't want to accept that their children may
yeah.
have ADHD. Is this a thing?
Yes, and you've actually touched on something we did yesterday. We did a radio show on,
Oh, good.
myself and my colleague. We had a radio show on neurodiversity in the Black community.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
actually
I'm
had,
glad this. Yeah,
yeah, we had a radio, because this is a real problem. It is a big, big, real problem.
yeah,
I have seen, despite me being, West African Nigerian, I have seen so many in my community come in. When
yeah,
the children are even obviously autistic, there have been so many in my community where I'm begging them that please let your child go and have the assessment. And they're saying, Dr. Tako, there's nothing wrong. No, she's
yeah.
going to talk and all
I've
that.
seen it so much, and it's so
Yeah,
frustrating because
yeah,
you know what, they don't mean it badly, because they
Yeah,
want the best for their child,
yeah,
and they don't want to pigeonhole their child. And
yeah,
so I understand where it's coming from, but that's why we need to break the stigma that
yeah,
actually neurodivergence isn't a bad thing. It can
yeah.
be a gifted thing.
It is. It's a
It's
yeah,
But we
exactly.
need to get that information out there, and
Yeah,
that's why I try and spread it so far and wide. And I've been really interested in exploring that topic, with a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons why, when I saw your profile and I saw that you had wrote about in the profile, I was like, yes, because I think that that is something needs to be spoke about. Because I know,
yeah,
as a Muslim, in the not everyone, because I'm not saying everyone is the same. You have different people of
yeah,
different races and nationalities, but in the Muslim community, I know sometimes it can be taboo, when your
yeah.
child has these things. So, and I know in the Gambian community, I know a lot of mums that say, no, my child hasn't got ADHD or anything.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
I do think it is definitely, what can we do? What can we do?
I think that we can. We do. I think you're already doing the right thing, and I think that we have to break this information into a way that they can relate with
Yeah.
and they can communicate. Because you know what happens as well is if people go to the hospital and the clinician there is doing business as usual and not really having time to think about people's culture, think about that, then they're just going to do business as usual assessment
Hmm.
and just not. And if they say, no, I don't want it, they'll just say, okay, that's fine, you don't want it.
Yeah.
And do you understand?
Yeah.
But our assessment should be culturally relevant.
Yeah. A hundred
And
percent.
so I'm, in fact, part of the work I'm doing is building courses to train clinicians on culturally informed assessments, because that's a big thing that's missing in the way assessments are done. You need to, when you connect with people where they are, you can listen to them. So we don't negate their worries or beliefs. We understand it from the point of view they're coming from, because there's a reason why they have those thoughts. We're
Yeah.
all coming from different cultures,
Yeah,
and
I was born in the UK, and
yeah,
when someone said to me in the beginning, "Your child's autistic," I thought, "What the hell? That's not something you'd say." And I was autistic all along, so I
yeah,
understand completely.
yeah. So we need to, and that's what we need to do. We need to do things where we're talking to people like human beings and actually trying to explain things to them. Because if we use the typical Western way of explaining things, not many people will connect with that, because we have to bring things down to their level, and that's the thing. What I'm trying to do and develop ways in which we connect with our community. We
I'm
don't
so glad that
blame.
I'm so glad that, because I didn't know that anyone was doing that, and it's something
Yeah,
I've been thinking about for so much. So I'm
yeah,
so glad that that is in
yeah.
the pipeline.
Yeah, and if you ever want to like do a program or something, a webinar, and you want me to come and talk, I'm happy to do that, Emmy.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Because I think it is so, so important.
Yeah,
That's why I try and get lots of people from lots of different cultures,
yeah,
because it's so important. Because neurodivergence is everywhere.
yeah. It
It
is.
doesn't
It
discriminate.
is. It
Yeah.
is. It
And
is.
if someone's listening today because they're worried about their own child, but they don't know where to start, what would your advice be?
Oh, my advice would be, again, document these concerns, document what you have noticed, look for I think it's always good for people to connect again, maybe with support groups around that they you can talk to people. But we're here, so I'm happy for people to contact Early Intervention Matters podcast, ask questions. We've signposted people to appropriate places that they can go. We also try to produce some relevant information for them to see. And we think when we feel that producing readily available information in ways that people can understand helps as well, so that
Do
they
you,
know which direction to go.
do you think we're getting better at destigmatizing neurodivergence? Are we getting there?
I think maybe a little bit, because obviously there's more talk about
Yeah.
it. but I think that there's still a long way to go in terms of the public also. Do you understand? Because we still have those things where, I mean, I was at an event yesterday, and there was a little boy who was with his mother, and it was a kind of cultural event. And what
Hmm.
was interesting is, I saw the little boy getting quite distressed. I mean, it was such a busy day yesterday.
Yeah.
Immediately, I saw the boy getting. I could spot that he was autistic, and he was, with his mom. His mom was trying to settle him, and then I heard some people, obviously from my culture, say, "Who is that boy making that noise? Who is that boy making that?"
Yeah.
You and I was like, "Yeah, this is it." They can't relate that. They can't. For them, it's like, "Why is he making that noise? Why is he making that noise?" I
Yeah.
could readily spot that he was autistic, and the mother was trying to calm him down. He had been in a party that was quite stimulating, so I could
So he was had
understand.
sensory overload.
Yeah. So if our communities could understand that, we hold lots of public events and things, then it will be good for people to be that aware when they're holding this type of events and stuff, to be sensitive about children who are neurodiverse in that community, the
Yeah.
churches as
The
well,
mosques,
the
the yeah,
university. Things
synagogues,
can be
yeah.
quite
I remember
noisy.
because I used to send my children to the mosque to learn to read and write Arabic when
Yeah,
they were small, and one of the mosques they used to make my one with Tourette's face the wall the whole time he was
yeah,
there,
there.
and I would ring them up and I would be like, "This is neurodivergence, and our religion is really not about this."
Yeah,
So I think it's people. It's not the religion. It's not. It's the people.
yeah, it's
Um,
the people. It's the people.
yeah,
I did one talk once on faith and neurodiversity, about how faith places of worship need to be sensitive
yeah.
and need to be responsive to the fact that we have people who are neurodiverse, and we need to cater for them. We shouldn't isolate them.
Amen. What's
Absolutely.
one myth about ADHD or autism that you wish we could get rid of?
Oh, there's I mean, one of the myths is, oh, it's bad parenting.
Hmm.
That's a common one that people would say, it's bad parenting, it's laziness. I mean, I've had families that have treated their child or diagnosed them with ADHD, and they said to me, "Oh my God, for years we thought he was just being lazy."
Yeah.
And we said that, "Oh no, you're just lazy and lazy." And the more that, they were blaming and really blaming the child so much. So it's something that is quite sad.
It is really sad, especially when we internalize that as
Yeah,
neurodivergent people, and then I've carried that narrative around with me
yeah,
my whole life.
yeah,
It is really sad. When
yeah.
I went for my assessment as an adult, they sent me away from my first assessment because they couldn't tell whether my autism. So it turns out my dad's autistic, very, very
Mm.
neurodivergent, and which was hard for him to accept. But now he's with it now. He's good. But they said to me at first they couldn't tell whether my neurodivergence was nature or nurture, because what had happened was my dad is very autistic and everything was very and everything was very in place, and we was like an army, so we had to do everything just right. So I thought everything that he taught me was right, and this is how the world is. So they couldn't diagnose me at that time because
Mm.
they said they couldn't tell whether it was nature or nurture. Is this a thing? I always thought, what the hell? Does this happen to people?
Well, the thing is, it's. I think what people feel we should understand is that these conditions are highly genetic.
Yeah,
So before we start blaming nurture, genetics is one strong factor that we know, that the conditions are highly heritable. And that's why when we look, and part of our assessments regularly is finding out whether there's a parent or a sibling or someone in the family who has similar traits,
yeah,
because that's the most likely explanation for it.
yeah. It come from somewhere
Yeah,
normally.
yeah.
What's something that gives you hope about the future for neurodivergent children?
I think that one of the things is we're living through an era of communication technology um, development, and that includes artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And I think there is a huge scope for trying to deploy this in making communication, awareness and tools to help support families.
Use it
And
for
I,
our better.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm saying that as a clinician who has been developing apps as well, because all along I've known the areas that families I see struggle with and the children, and I've taken all that information of the pain points where there hasn't been suitable materials for them or things to support them. Take, for example, children with tics or
Yeah.
children with significant anxiety and all that. I've taken that bit of concern and tried to explore to make apps that could help
Accessible.
families accessible. Yeah.
I 100% agree, because I remember when I went for my diagnosis, I sat down each time I went to a therapist or a diagnosis. I would sit down with a middle-aged, very posh, white woman, something completely different to what I was. And
Mm,
I couldn't relate, and they were talking clinical jargon and I didn't understand. And that's
yeah.
why I think it should be made so accessible for
Yeah.
everybody, that
Yeah.
you can find it on your platform, and where you are, it can meet you
Mm.
where you are. Dr. Takon, where can we find you if somebody wants to find you, platform wise, podcast wise, website wise? Where can we find you?
So I'm on my website is www.drtakon, drtakon. So it's
Hmm.
drtakon.com. And that platform also hosts my website. It has a contact information sheet if you want to reach me. So that's, and all my podcasts are there. I'm on YouTube, and it's Dr. Inyang Takon on YouTube, and I post lots of information there as well, some short videos explaining some things. And like I said earlier, I will send some of those other videos to you because I think it will be useful for your
Thank you so
audience
much.
to be able to reach it. And I'm also School Doctor is www.school-doctor.com. And School Doctor, I co-founded this with two colleagues. It's a social enterprise, and what's been helpful with School Doctor is we try to do a lot of work with schools. So sometimes schools have been able to refer some children to us to see
Yeah.
and assess from their own budget. Some of the families who can't afford the private fee, but where
Yeah.
the children are clearly struggling. And so we also provide training, and we have a huge number of resources as well on School Doctor platform. So I would also recommend that families check the School Doctor platform. And I'm also on Instagram on the podcast, Early Intervention podcast, and TikTok on podcast as well.
Thank you, honestly, so much. You are like, thank God, praise God. You are a wealth of information. And there is so many areas that I wanted to go into today, because I wanted to ask about fetal alcohol syndrome, because I
Yeah,
know a few people that have self-medicated that have ADHD, and then they have found out in pregnancy that that they're pregnant, and then sometimes their child comes out with fetal alcohol syndrome, but then is also affected by ADHD and autism.
yeah,
And I know that these are all such areas, and there was so much I wanted to ask you, but honestly, I'm so thankful
yeah.
for you joining me today. I genuinely think this conversation is going to reassure so many parents who may be wondering whether to trust their instincts or where to go next. And I will leave all of your links, because you are a wealth of information.
Oh,
So
thank you so much,
thank you
Ellie.
so, so much.
Thank you, Ellie. It was really lovely being with you,
Have a lovely
and thank
evening.
you for the work that you are doing as
Oh, no,
well.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.